Hey everyone, I'm still on the road. I'm here in Washington, D.C. And I just saw a clip of Ayaan Hirsi. I've discussed her in the past, shown some videos of her. She's really an amazing woman. She grew up in Somalia as a Muslim and suffered greatly as a Muslim, and then she escaped and she went to the Netherlands and eventually, moved to the West. She left Islam, and she's one of the clearest voices on the dangers of Islam to the West. And in this clip here, she says something about democracy and Islam. And I think I could add something to what she says that she doesn't quite get you. She identifies a real problem, but the explanation she gives is kind of incomplete. And I think when we fill out the explanation, it's even more powerful than she lets on. I'm not saying that I'm disagreeing with her in any way at all. I'm just really expanding on what she says. And it really gets down to the foundations of what makes Islam fundamentally different than biblical faith. And that's what I want to discuss in this video. So let's go ahead and pull that up here. And here's Ayaan Hirsi.
Do you think Islam is compatible with democracy? Certainly Western democracy, the way we practice them. Are they compatible in any sense?
If you define democracy as holding elections, Muslims will hold elections to come to power, and then they will abolish democracy, and they will say no more elections.
Yeah.
And
so the ultimate destination of Islamism is the end of democracy.
It is the end of democracy. It's the application of Sharia law. It is to say an Islamist does not believe that human beings can make laws. An Islamist wants to apply God's law, Sharia law, as he sees it. And so wherever Islamists take control, that's the first thing that they do. They come in and they say, as of now, when the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, the Taliban in Afghanistan, and in places people don't care about and never look to, but places like Mali, parts of Niger, parts of the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, parts of Somalia, everywhere where when the Islamists come out of Aceh in Indonesia, when they come to power, what they try to do is to apply Islamic law or Sharia law. And they spell that out. They say it. It's one of those really important things where you shouldn't be listening to experts who talk and speak and analyze Islamists. You should listen to the Islamists themselves and what they tell you.
Of course, which is the antithesis of free speech, obviously. So just bringing it to the UK, if I may, for a second. The 2021 census had the UK with...
Okay, so we're going to, I'm going to stop it there. And, because I think I have enough there to talk about what I want to share with you. So Ayaan Hirsi here is saying that Islam is incompatible with democracy because Islam rejects the notion that human beings have the authority to make law. In Islam, law comes from Allah. Human legal authority is illegitimate. Only Sharia, divine law, is legitimate. And therefore, a system built on the idea that people can make their own laws through elected representatives is, from an Islamic theological standpoint, it just doesn't work. It's wrong. It's a kind of heresy. Putting human authority where only divine authority belongs. Now, the first thing I want to say is this. She's right. And this is not a slur against Muslims. It's not Islamophobia. It's a straightforward description of the very basics of Islamic political theology. And if you understand that theology, her statement is not controversial. It's obvious. But here's what I want to add, because here, Hirsi, she identifies the problem. Islam rejects human legislative authority, but she doesn't fully explain why. She doesn't tell you where that rejection comes from, what it's rooted in, and what it means about the fundamental difference between Islam and biblical faith. And that difference is what I want to talk about in this video, because it's one of the most important things you can understand about the world we're living in right now and the threats that we're facing. So the word I want to focus on now is a word that we talk about, but is never fully explained. And that is the word covenant. A covenant is not a contract. Okay. A covenant is it's not a set of rules. It's not even really a law in the ordinary sense. A covenant is a binding relationship between two parties, both of whom have standing, both of whom have obligations on the table, and both of whom enter the relationship by choice. Now, the entire structure of biblical faith, Jewish and Christian, is based on the concept of covenant. God doesn't just issue commands to human beings. He enters into a relationship with them. He makes promises. He receives promises in return. And in that relationship, something amazing happens. Human beings are empowered by a relationship to the God that they worship. They're given genuine standing. They're treated as partners in something larger than themselves, not merely as God's subjects and slaves to be commanded, but as partners in the project of building a world. Islam is built on a completely different foundation, meaning the posture of the human being vis-a-vis God is fundamentally different. The very word Islam means submission. Don't let anyone tell you it means something else. That's what it means. It means submission. It doesn't mean covenant. It doesn't mean relationship. It means submission. The highest status that a human being can achieve in Islam is abd Allah, a slave of God. And we also say that in the Bible, that we want to be servants of God, but we'll get into that in a bit. There's a very big difference. Now, this isn't a criticism of Islam. It's their theology. It's a compliment, right? To be a slave of God. The goal of human existence is perfect submission to the will of Allah. Now, I want to be very clear about what I'm saying here. I want to make sure I'm not misunderstood. The structural difference between a covenantal relationship with God and a submission relationship with God has enormous consequences for how you think about human authority, about human law, about government, whether or not government is legitimate. And Ayaan Hirsi, whether she uses this language or not, is pointing directly to that difference. Now, I want to put this in biblical terms. Even people who read the Bible don't necessarily notice this. In Deuteronomy chapter 17, it talks a lot about human authority. First, it talks about the courts, then it talks about the king. And in the section about the courts, it talks about a situation where there's a legal dispute and the local judges have a hard time with it. They have to go to the Supreme Court. And it says that you're supposed to listen to the rulings of the court in the place that God chose, which means it was a euphemism for Jerusalem. Okay, now God is telling the nation of Israel, when you have a legal question that can't be resolved, go to human judges. Okay, but Islam also has human judges. But then the sages, the Jewish sages in the Talmud, take this even further. They derive from this passage that the human court has authority to make laws, to make rulings, even interpretations of biblical text that often take it away from the simple meaning of the text because of the needs of the moment in this world, that there's a covenantal relationship between God and man, where God gave us general rules, but it's up to human beings to have authority on this earth, the authority of the human legal system. That's the point I want to make here. Whether it's the letter of the law of the text talking about legal cases, or it's the way the rabbis interpret it, talking about even legislating law. The idea is that the human legal system is real. It's divinely sanctioned. Human beings have real authority on this earth. And that's part of the structure of the covenant. It means that people have a partnership with God in governing this world. In a covenantal relationship, here's the best way to sum this up. In a covenantal relationship, God empowers human beings, right, to exercise their own judgment, their own human agency. Okay, he gives human beings real, fallible, limited human beings, right? He gives human beings the authority and the responsibility to govern themselves according to the principles of justice that he has taught them. Okay, and that's the concept of covenant. Again, covenant is a partnership. It's an empowering relationship. Let me give you another example of this, of where human authority derives from in biblical faith. The appointment of a king in ancient Israel. Okay, in most ancient cultures, the king was either divine himself or was understood to be directly appointed by the gods. His authority was absolute and unquestionable because it came directly from the divine realm. That's the concept of a king was. The people had no say in who's their king. They were subjects. But look what the Bible says. In Deuteronomy 17, the passage about appointing a king begins with the words, When you come to the land and you say, I will set a king over me, meaning only if the people say that they want to set a king over them, I will set a king over me. Only when you say that do you then appoint a king, meaning the whole appointment of a king derives only from, it emerges only from the people's choice to have a king. Without the human initiative to appoint a king, there is no king. The initiative comes from the people. God is not commanding the nation of Israel to have a king. He's saying, if you desire to have a king, if you want to be governed by a king, then this is how you do it. It's huge. And then when you get to the actual stories of kings in the Bible, in the book of Samuel, for example, the pattern is right there. Saul is anointed, and he's presented to the people, and the people accept him. David is anointed, but then the elders of Israel come to him and make a covenant with him. The text actually uses that word. And then he becomes the king. Authority flows not just downward from God, but also upward from the people. That's the concept of a covenant. This is the biblical foundation of consensual government. The consent of the governed is right there in the book of Deuteronomy. We only appoint a king if the people want one. Right? The idea that rulers derive their authority not just from God, but from the consent of the people. It's a biblical concept. Think about that. It's not a modern Western invention. It's right there in the book of Deuteronomy. When you decide that you want a king, you shall appoint a king over you. And that king is subject to the laws. And in Islam, the caliphate, the idea of Islam is that the world is governed by a caliphate. And who's the caliph? The caliph is a direct descendant of Muhammad who's chosen by God. There's no ability to change who the human authority is, because it's not really human authority. It's just a choice God made imposed on the people. Okay, the choosing of your own king is only possible in a covenantal framework. I want to put all this together. When I say covenant, I mean, look at the authority of the court, the authority of the king. In the biblical framework, there is real human agency that is being empowered by God to really take the reins of governance of this world. If the relationship between God and human beings is covenantal, if human beings have genuine standing, genuine agency, genuine partnership in the running of the world, then it makes sense that human beings have a role in authorizing their own rulers, their own system of government. But in a submission framework, this makes no sense. If the relationship is pure submission, if the only legitimate authority is divine authority, and human beings are slaves whose job is to implement divine authority alone, with no agency of their own, then the idea of the people choosing their rulers, of law emerging from human deliberation, of a parliament voting on legislation, all of that is not just politically wrong. According to Islam, it's theologically wrong. It's putting human will where divine will alone is supposed to be sovereign. And that's exactly what Ayaan Hirsi is saying. Now, I want to be precise about the Islamic side of this because precision matters here. In classical Islamic political theology, sovereignty, hakimiyya, belongs to Allah alone. This is not a fringe position. It's mainstream. The Quran states it explicitly in multiple places. Judgment belongs to Allah alone. No human being, no parliament, no court, no people has the authority to make law that is independent of the divine law. Human beings can only administer divine law. Sayyid Qutb, the intellectual godfather of the Muslim Brotherhood of modern political Islam, his influence runs through Hamas, Al-Qaeda, all of the Muslim Brotherhood offshoots. Qutb is the guy. He made this idea that I'm describing in this video, he made this idea the centerpiece of his political thought. He argued that any system, he had disdain for democracy. And he said that any system in which human beings make law is a form of jahiliyyah, pre-Islamic ignorance or barbarism. Democracy, nationalism, socialism. He said all of them are jahiliyyah because all of them place human authority above divine authority. Meaning they're all, in his framework, they're all like a kind of idolatry. They're a kind of heresy. And that idea, I mean, Qutb was a bit extreme, but that idea was not extremism. That's a direct application of Muslim theology. So if Allah is the only legitimate sovereign, and sovereignty means the authority to make law, then any system that gives that authority to human beings is a rebellion against Allah. That's Qutb. So Ayaan Hirsi is not inventing this. She's reading the theology correctly. Now, I can hear some of you thinking, wait a minute. The Bible is also divine law. The Torah is God's law given to Moses at Sinai. Don't Jews and Christians also believe that God is the ultimate authority, that his law is above human law? So what's the difference? It's a fair question. And it's a good question, but the difference is everything. Listen carefully. Yes, biblical faith absolutely affirms that God is the ultimate authority, that his law is higher than any human law, that no king, no parliament, no court is above God. The prophets of Israel spent centuries making exactly that point, rebuking kings, challenging rulers, holding power accountable to a standard higher than itself. Okay, but here's what biblical faith also affirms, and this is what the Islamic framework does not affirm. This is the difference. God chose to share, in the biblical faith, God chose to share his authority with human beings. Okay, he didn't have to, but that's what a covenant means. Let's go back to Deuteronomy 17. God is not saying, here's my law, now implement it exactly as written with no room for human judgment. He's saying, when you have a question, go to the human court, follow their rulings. They can even pass new laws. Okay? The rabbis in the Talmud have a remarkable story to illustrate this theological point. There's a passage in the Talmud where the rabbis are debating a point of law, and a heavenly voice, a bat kol in Hebrew, speaks from heaven and declares that one of the rabbis is correct. And the other rabbi, who's actually speaking for the majority, because the Bible also says we're supposed to follow the majority in the case of a dispute. And the other rabbi stands up and says, we don't listen to heavenly voices. That's not how we determine law. The Torah God gave us says we're supposed to follow the majority. So now you're giving me a heavenly voice, and they rule against the heavenly voice. The Torah was given to us at Sinai, says the objecting rabbi. It's no longer in heaven. Human beings have the authority to interpret it and apply it. You, God yourself, you gave us that authority. And in the story, God himself laughs and says, my children have defeated me. They've won. They're right. Now think about what that story is saying theologically. God gave the Torah to human beings. And in giving it, he transferred real interpretive authority to human beings. He gave us the ability to look at the world and apply the law and to govern ourselves. The law is no longer in heaven. That's actually what the rabbi says. It is not in heaven. It belongs to the human community. And God delights in that because that is what a covenant is. That's what a covenant is. It empowers. It empowers us. So when God enters a covenant with human beings and he gives them his law, he's making them genuine partners in the legal and moral enterprise. Okay? They're not merely administrators of a fixed code. It's a covenantal living relationship. That is categorically from the Islamic framework, in which hakimiyya, the sovereignty, belongs to Allah alone. Human beings have no genuine legislative authority. Any system that grants them legislative authority is considered a rebellion against God. That's Qutb. Right? In other words, both the biblical tradition and the Islamic tradition say that God is the ultimate authority, but the biblical tradition says that God chose to share that authority with human beings through a covenant. The Islamic tradition says that authority cannot be shared. It can only be submitted to. And the difference between sharing and submitting is the difference between a civilization that can produce democracy, and that's why biblical faith has always produced democracies. Israel is a democracy. Western nations that are based on a Christian civilization are democracies. It's only when they really stray from faith that they start also straying from democracy. a civilization that can produce democracy comes from a biblical mindset. So when Ayaan Hirsi Ali says that Islam is incompatible with democracy, she's not being provocative for the sake of it. She's not just saying, oh, they're a bunch of backward fanatics. She's identifying a real point of theology. And what I want you to take away from this is something more than just a political point about Islam and democracy. I want you to see the deeper structure. A biblical faith, Jewish and Christian, is a covenantal relationship with God. The covenant empowers human beings. It gives us standing and agency and authority and dignity. It produces free people. That's why God liberates us. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. That's the opening line of the Ten Commandments. God liberates us. And then we govern ourselves under God. Not instead of God, but with God as partners in a covenantal project. Submission, Islam is the opposite of that. A civilization built on submission, however sincere, however spiritually serious, that cannot produce what a covenant produces. So democracy is just, it's anathema to Islamic theological thinking about how society is ordered. Right? The theology doesn't allow for that type of human freedom and agency. This is why I keep saying on this channel that the conflict we're in right now is not primarily political. It's not even primarily military. It's a civilizational, spiritual conflict. It's a conflict between two fundamentally different ideas of what a human being is and what relationship do human beings have with God and with authority. What's the posture of the relationship? And understanding that distinction is the first step towards defending what we have. Please make sure to like and subscribe and share. I hope this made sense. Please drop a comment below. Let me know what you thought of what I had to say here. It's a little bit different than a lot of my videos. And please make sure that you're subscribed to our newsletters at Israel 365 Action and Israel 365 News. Go to Israel365action.com so you could really stay abreast of everything that we're doing. And you know, one of the main focuses of Israel 365 Action in our messaging, in our programming, in our education is the defense of Judeo-Christian Western civilization, the biblically based, I don't even like the term Judeo-Christian, biblically based Western civilization, because that's really the whole framework of our thinking. The theological differences between Jews and Christians are internal disputes within two groups of people who share a general understanding of what God is and what it means to have a relationship with God. And that's what I'm trying to explain in this video. And when we see that in the Muslim world, democracy just never takes hold properly, they just don't get it. It just doesn't work. You understand that it's because there's a fundamental lack of belief in human agency, in the ability of human beings, or the legitimacy of human beings governing themselves, making laws for themselves, having real freedom and real agency to build their own society. There's a kind of disdain for it built in to the theology that they're dealing with. That's what I'm trying to explain here. I hope this made some sense. Again, please drop a comment. Let me know what you think of this. And yeah, we'll see you on the next video. God bless.